I froze in the rain the moment I heard her voice. Olivia Hayes. The woman I had loved longer than I'd ever admitted was trembling when she said it. If you had told me sooner, I would have been yours. She was wearing another man's ring. He was standing right beside her. 10 years of silence, Dr. Try. 10 years of telling myself it didn't matter. I smiled, the kind that doesn't reach anything, and stepped closer. Is it too late now? I whispered, and for the first time, Olivia's eyes weren't sure. The invitation had come to me through my firm, not through her. That's the part I keep returning to. The sheer, indifferent machinery of coincidence. A client named Daniel Brooks wanted a boutique hotel designed from the foundation up, but high concept, high budget, aggressive timeline. My partner handed me the file on a Tuesday morning and said it was exactly the kind of project that could define the next decade of our practice. I said yes before I'd read past the cover page. I showed up to the engagement party as the architect, introduced, shaken hands, given a flute of something cold and effervescent. I was looking at a preliminary site plan, folded in my jacket pocket, when the crowd shifted and I saw her across the room. My brain ran through a half-second of confused recognition before it arrived, fully and without mercy, at the truth. Olivia. She was talking with a woman in red near the bar, gesturing with that particular economy of motion she'd always had, never wasteful, always precise. She laughed at something and touched her collarbone once briefly, the way she used to when something genuinely caught her off guard. I knew that gesture the way I knew the sound of my own name. She turned, and our eyes met. Neither of us moved. The space between us, maybe 30 feet of polished floor and candlelight, became its own kind of geography. Something impassable. Then she looked away. That was the detail that stayed with me long after everything else blurred. She looked away too quickly, the way you look away from something that cost you something to look at. I'd known Olivia Hayes since we were 22 years old. We'd sat in the same urban planning seminar for 2 semesters. She was pre-law, I was architecture. And we'd spent more time arguing about the ethics of gentrification than the professor had probably intended. She was the smartest person in any room she entered, and she made sure you understood that, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had done the work. I had been in love with her for most of that second semester, Tarty. I just hadn't known the right words for it yet. And by the time I did, she was gone. Accepted to law school across the country, packing boxes. Saying goodbye with a hug that lasted slightly too long and meant everything and nothing at the same time. I shook Daniel Brooks's hand an hour later, and told him I was looking forward to the project. He was handsome in a polished way, warm in a practiced way, and he put his hand on the small of Olivia's back when she finally joined us. She introduced me as an old friend from college. Her voice didn't waver. Her eyes didn't meet mine. I drove home through the rain telling myself it didn't matter. I had a daughter to put to bed. I had blueprints to revise. I had a whole life that had been built. Carefully, in the 10 years since I'd last stood in the same room as Olivia Hayes. But I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark listening to the rain and thought about the way her eyes had gone away from me too fast. In college, I had a very specific and very stupid idea of what love required before it could be declared. I believed, with the kind of conviction that only the young and broke can manage, that you had to arrive. You had to have something to offer before you had the right to say what you felt. Olivia had been accepted to a top 5 law school. Her future was clear, articulate, already on its way. I was 23 and working 3 part-time jobs to stay enrolled. Living in an apartment where the heat sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. I had debt and ambition and exactly nothing else. I told myself she deserved better. I told myself I'd say something when I was ready. When I had something real to give her. I told myself it was a matter of timing, not courage. The night before she left, we sat on the back steps of the apartment building she'd been subletting. Drinking cheap beer and talking until 2 in the morning, die. She kept pausing in the middle of sentences. I kept thinking, Say it now. And I kept not saying it. She hugged me goodbye at her car the next morning. I held on for 1 second too long. She looked at me, really looked. The way she had a habit of looking when she was trying to figure something out. And I smiled and stepped back and said, "Let me know when you land safe." She sent a text that night. "Just landed at White. Miss you already." I sat with my phone in my hand for 40 minutes trying to write something back. I typed and deleted and typed and deleted until I landed on. Good. Got. Get some sleep. That was the last real thing we said to each other for 10 years. Standing in the lobby of Daniel Brooks' office building 3 weeks after the engagement party, waiting to present preliminary design concepts, I finally understood what I had been too young and too afraid to understand back then. The man Olivia was marrying, accomplished, certain, financially settled, was exactly the version of a man I had believed I needed to become before I'd earned the right to love her. And somehow, in all the years I'd spent building myself into something I thought was worthy, she had found someone else who already was. The irony was so clean it was almost funny. Almost. We kept things professional. That was Olivia's doing, and I respected it. She attended the early design meetings as Daniel's representative. She was handling some of the legal and contractual side, and she was precise, prepared, and carefully neutral. She addressed me by my last name twice in the first meeting before switching to first names, when Daniel laughed and said we were all friends here. Daniel was good at that. At setting a tone. He was the kind of man who filled a room without raising his voice, who made you feel included in something by the simple act of looking at you. I could see why Olivia had said yes to him. On the surface, there was very little not to say yes to. But I noticed things. Small things. In the second meeting, she started to suggest an alternative layout for the hotel's public courtyard. A good idea. Actually better than what was on the table. And Daniel talked over her. Not rudely, just fluently, redirecting the room before she'd finished. She didn't push back. She made a small note on her legal pad and moved on. I watched her do it, and something tightened in my chest. After the third meeting, she stayed back to review a timeline discrepancy while the others filed out. We were alone in the conference room for the first time since college. The silence between us had the texture of something old. "You're good at this," she said, looking at the elevation sketches spread across the table. "You were always going to be good at this." "So were you," I said. She smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. "I am," she said, in a tone that could have meant anything or nothing. She gathered her papers and left before I could decide whether to say more or why. But I noticed as she walked out that she hadn't once mentioned the wedding. Not the date, not the venue, not the details that every person I'd ever met on the verge of getting married seemed physically compelled to discuss. Not a word. My daughter Mia, who was 10 years old and had inherited my habit of noticing things I'd rather she hadn't, met Olivia for the first time by accident 3 days later. I had brought Mia to the site to show her the early excavation. She loved construction sites. Loved the scale of things being made, and Olivia pulled up at the same time for an inspection walkthrough. Mia watched Olivia the way she watched everything. Quietly, completely, like she was reading something. Then she walked over and said, I'm Mia. My dad talks about this building like it's a person." Olivia laughed. A real one, surprised out of her. She crouched down to Mia's level. "Does he? What does he say about it?" "That it's going to be something people remember," Mia said. Then she tilted her head and added, "You're very pretty, like a movie lawyer." Olivia laughed again. I think it was the first time I'd heard her laugh without reservation in weeks. She looked up at me over Mia's head with an expression I didn't know how to interpret. Something soft and unguarded and quickly contained. That evening, driving home, Mia was quiet for several miles. Then she said, "Dad, do you know that lady from before?" "From before when?" Before now, she said, with the certainty of someone who already knew the answer and was just giving you the chance to tell the truth. I kept my eyes on the road. We were friends in college. Mia considered this. She looked at you like she was deciding something. She said, I didn't say anything. That's not nothing, my daughter said, and went back to looking out the window. It was a Tuesday night, close to 11, when we ended up alone in the site trailer going over revised load-bearing specifications. A thunderstorm had rolled in fast, grounding both of us in the small, humming space with its folding chairs and fluorescent light, and the smell of coffee that had been sitting too long. I was marking up a structural drawing when she said, without looking up from her own papers, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Did you ever think about going into something safer? Structurally, I mean, residential, something smaller scale." Once. I said, when Mia was about 3, for about 2 months, I thought maybe smaller and steadier was the right move. I paused. Then I realized I'd just be miserable and still tired. At least this way I'm tired with purpose. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I think about that sometimes, the safer version. I set down my pencil. Is that what this is? The safer version? She looked at me then. Not quickly, not away. Just at me. Daniel is a good person, she said, and it came out carefully, like she'd tested the sentence before and found it held. I know, I said. That's not what I asked. The rain hammered the roof. She looked down at her papers. He makes sense, she said, finally. We make sense. He's stable. He's kind. Mostly. He knows what he wants. She paused. I've been doing the math on what I want for a long time. I'm 36. The math keeps pointing the same direction. Math isn't the same as a reason. I said, no. She admitted. But it's a lot easier to live with. We didn't say much after that. We worked until midnight, and she drove home in the rain, and I sat in the trailer for another 20 minutes after she'd gone, listening to the storm slow down. Thinking about what it cost a person to choose safety over the thing they actually wanted. Thinking about how well I knew that particular cost. I saw it clearly for the first time on a Friday afternoon, 6 weeks before the scheduled wedding. I had stopped by the hotel property to check on a masonry issue, and Daniel was there with Olivia. Walking the perimeter. They didn't see me immediately. I hung back near the temporary fence, watching from a distance, the way you do when you realize you're looking at something private. Daniel had his phone out, dodgy way. He was reading from it, gesturing as he spoke. Olivia was nodding. Steady, even nodding. The kind that doesn't mean agreement so much as endurance. He pointed at something on the screen. She said something in response, and his expression shifted. Briefly, like a door closing. He spoke again, lower, and she stopped nodding and simply listened. I knew, without being close enough to hear the words, what the texture of that exchange was. I had seen it before in the architecture of other people's lives, the particular configuration of one person explaining why the other person's idea didn't make sense. The gracious management of a wife-to-be. The patience that wasn't really patience. Later that day, in the site office, Olivia mentioned in passing that she'd had to cancel dinner with a friend because Daniel's client event had run long, and he'd needed her there. 3rd time this month. I said, not thinking Joshua. She looked at me sideways. He gets anxious when he doesn't know where I am. She said, it's not, it's just how he is. That's a reason. I said, not a defense. Her jaw tightened slightly. You don't know him. No. I agreed. But I know you. She gathered her things and left without responding. I stood there thinking I'd gone too far, that it wasn't my place, that 10 years of silence had cost me the right to say things like that. But the wedding was 3 weeks away, and I couldn't make myself stop counting. It was Mia who broke through first, the way children do, not cruelty, not cleverness. just the complete absence of the filters adults spend years building. Yeah. She had been with me at a design review and Olivia arrived early, and the three of us ended up in the small waiting area together for about 15 minutes. Mia had her sketchbook out, drawing in her meticulous, careful way, while Olivia and I made small talk about the tile samples spread on the table. Then Mia looked up at Olivia and said, plainly, conversationally, as if she were asking about the weather, "Do you love my dad?" The room went very quiet. Olivia blinked. Her hand moved once on the table, a small involuntary motion, quickly stilled. "Mia," I said, "I'm just asking." Mia said, unbothered. "Because he's a good person, and I think you know him really well. And sometimes I watch you both not look at each other, and it seems like it takes a lot of work." Olivia's expression did something complicated and private. She looked at Mia for a long moment, and then she looked at me. And in that look, there was something I'd spent 10 years trying to convince myself didn't exist. Then she picked up her pen and said, very steadily, "Your dad is a wonderful person, Mia." She looked back at her documents. "He always has been." Mia glanced at me with the serene certainty of someone who had just confirmed their hypothesis, and went back to drawing. I excused myself to get water I didn't need, and stood in the hallway breathing through the weight of those 16 words. "Your dad is a wonderful person. He always has been." After I'd put Mia to bed, Olivia texted me for the first time outside of work hours. Just 3 words. "Is she always like that?" "But I'm not trying." I typed back. "Every single day." Applause. Then, "You're lucky." Then nothing else. I stared at my phone in the dark and understood, with a clarity that was almost physical, that she was not talking only about Mia. 2 days later, she cornered me after everyone else had left a coordination meeting. She stood across the conference table from me, and she looked like a person who had been holding something up for a very long time, and was beginning to feel the weight. "I need you to hear something," she said. "Okay. I'm not unhappy." She said it firmly, like a declaration. "I want you to know that. I made a choice. And I stand by it. And I'm not some tragic figure waiting to be rescued. I know that." "Do you?" Her eyes met mine. "Because sometimes when you look at me, I feel like you're waiting for me to fall apart." "I'm not," I said. I stopped. "What?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm just not sure you're happy either." The silence stretched. "That's different," she said finally, very quietly. "Yeah," I said. "Well, I know." She left. Shot. And I stood there, once again in the particular silence she left behind, knowing that we were running out of time and that neither of us was brave enough yet to say the thing that needed to be said. It rained the evening of the rehearsal dinner. Not a dramatic storm, just the steady, soft, inevitable kind of rain that makes the city look like a watercolor and fills every outdoor space with the smell of wet stone. I was leaving the site, late, having stayed to resolve a last-minute issue with the lighting contractor. I was halfway to my car when I heard her call my name. She was standing near the gate in a dark coat, hair already damp, phone in one hand. She'd come from dinner, she said. She'd needed air. I should have kept walking. I should have said goodnight and left well enough alone. Instead, I stopped and turned. And we stood in the rain like two people who had been circling each other for 10 years and had finally, without meaning to, arrived at the center. "I keep thinking about something," she said. "Tell me." She looked at the ground for a moment, then back up at me. "Do you remember the night before I left for school? We sat on those steps until 2 in the morning. "I remember. I kept waiting," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "I kept waiting for you to say something. I told myself for weeks that you were going to say something. And then you didn't. And then I was gone." My chest contracted. Olivia, I'm not, I'm not saying it to blame you. She shook her head. I'm saying it because I need to say it out loud to someone before I get married in 14 days. And you're the only person it makes sense to say it to. She looked at me, and for a moment, she was 23 again, and so was I. If you had told me sooner, she said, her voice dropping to something almost private, I would have been yours. And there it was. The sentence I hadn't known I'd been waiting a decade to hear. It landed in me like something heavy and clean and devastating all at once. I had always been the one who stayed quiet, who stood at the edge of things and decided that silence was the responsible choice. Silence had protected me from risk, from rejection, from the particular exposure of wanting something I might not get. And silence had cost me 10 years. I stepped closer. She didn't move back. Olivia, I said, very quietly. Is it too late now? Her eyes filled. She didn't speak. She pressed her lips together and looked at me with something that was not an answer and not a refusal. It was something raw and unfinished and unbearable. Then headlights cut across the gate. Daniel's car pulled up to the curb. He stepped out and saw us standing in the rain. For a moment, no one moved. His expression did something controlled and precise. The same expression I'd seen him use in meetings when something had gone off script. There you are, he said, looking only at Olivia Darchashti. I've been calling you. She looked at him, then at me. Her hand went briefly, instinctively, to the ring on her finger. I was just heading back. She said, Dachi. I stepped aside, Dachi. She walked to his car. He opened her door without looking at me again. And then they were gone. And I was standing alone in the rain, with the shape of her words still in the air around me. 3 days before the wedding, Daniel made his move. He'd always operated in a particular register. Calm, measured, certain of the rules he was enforcing. But that Friday afternoon, he called a meeting that wasn't on any schedule. And when Olivia arrived, she found him waiting with the particular stillness of a man who has prepared what he's going to say and intends to get through it cleanly. He told her he knew. Not with specifics, but with the blunt certainty of someone who reads the temperature of rooms for a living. He told her there were 2 weeks left, that the venue was booked, that their families were flying in, that whatever she thought she was feeling was the predictable anxiety of someone making a real commitment for the first time in her adult life. He told her what she was going to choose. I wasn't in that room, but she told me about it later. She told me how she'd sat across from him and listened, and how somewhere in the middle of his precise and organized explanation of her own life, she had felt something go very quiet inside her. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a door closing. She'd spent 10 years building the version of herself that could choose stability without flinching. She'd made a science of it. She'd been so careful, so deliberate, and now the man she was about to marry was telling her who she was and what she felt and what she was going to do. And she realized, in the particular way that you realize something you've known for a while but needed one more push to name, that she had never in Daniel's presence been completely herself. Not once. He knew her resume, her ambitions, her wine preferences, her friends' names. He knew the version of her that ran on logic and efficiency. But he had never sat with her on back steps in the small hours of the morning and argued about urban planning until one of them was laughing and the other was furious, and both of them were fully, completely, dangerously present. She left that meeting and drove to the site. The building was empty, the crew gone for the day. She found me on the 3rd floor, reviewing window placement in the fading light. She stood in the doorway for a moment, and I turned and looked at her, and I knew without asking. I can't do it, she said. I set down my pencil. Not because of you, she said quickly. I need you to know that. It's not because of, I'm not walking out of an engagement because of a, maybe. I'm walking out because I looked at my life and I didn't recognize myself in it. Okay, I said. It needs to be about me first. She said. Do you understand that? Yes, I said. I do. She nodded. She stood in the doorway of an unfinished room, and she looked more like herself than I had seen her look in weeks. Then Mia's voice floated up from downstairs. She had come with me to the site again, sketching in the lobby, and Olivia heard it, and something softened in her face. Don't make it easy for her. Mia had said to me that morning, in her peculiar old-souled way, while I was making breakfast. She'd been talking about Olivia, apparently, without having been given the context. But don't make it hard either. Just be real. She'd poured her orange juice and added, as if it were obvious, and don't choose the thing that makes you sad, Olivia. Wherever you are, don't choose sad. I hadn't told her she wasn't in the room when she said it. But somehow, I think Olivia heard her anyway. She called off the engagement the following evening. Daniel did not take it with grey starshine. Not at first. He arrived at what had been their shared apartment with the collected energy of a man who had built a plan that was failing, and he argued with the precise, organized intensity of someone who believed that the right words in the right order could reverse any outcome. He listed reasons. He offered adjustments. He reframed and restructured and circled back. Olivia told me he was there for almost 2 hours. She sat with her back straight and her hands in her lap, and she let him finish every sentence. And then she said, calmly, that she was sorry for the pain she was causing and that her decision was final and that she needed him to go. He left taut. She sat in her empty apartment for a long time after. She didn't call me. She didn't come to find me. I found out the next morning when she sent a single message to the project thread. Your wedding is off. I'll still be available for project work on the schedule we discussed. 3 hours later, she sent me a separate message. I didn't do this for you, Ethan. I did it for me. I need you to understand that. I wrote back, you do. I'm glad you're okay. She didn't respond. I spent the rest of that day doing work that required my full attention, and I was grateful for it. Because underneath the relief, and there was relief, undeniable and sharp, there was something else. Something I hadn't expected. Doubt. Not about her. Not about what I felt. But about what I deserved to ask for. She had just dismantled something real and costly. She was rebuilding her life from the beginning. And the last thing she needed was to replace one complicated emotional situation with another. The last thing she needed was me, standing at the edge of her new beginning with my hands out, asking her to choose me now just because she hadn't chosen me before. I wasn't going to be a rebound. I wasn't going to be a solution to someone else's mistake. If she came to me, it had to be because she was certain, because she was choosing me, not running from Daniel. She deserved to make that choice with both hands free and both eyes open. So when she came to the site 2 days later, and we were alone for the first time since the night in the rain, she looked at me with something open and fragile in her expression. And I thought she might finally say it. I spoke first. I'm not going anywhere. I said, but I can't be the reason, Olivia. You have to be sure. And you can't be sure right now. Her expression shifted, something between relief and pain. Ethan, take the time you need. I said, I mean it. I went back to my drawings, and she stood there for a moment in the quiet. And then she left. 2 months passed. I don't tell you that lightly. 2 months is both very long and very short, depending on what you're doing with it. I spent mine the way I'd learned to spend uncertain time. Head down, deliberate, present where I was needed most. Mia had a school project on architecture and asked if she could interview me. We sat at the kitchen table for an hour while she recorded me on her little tablet and asked questions about why buildings mattered. Who got to decide what they looked like? Whether I'd ever made something I was truly proud of. I told her about a library I'd designed 5 years earlier for a small city that couldn't afford a famous architect. A modest building, nothing that would make a magazine, but full of light in a way I'd worked very hard to achieve. I said it was the one I was most proud of. She typed my answer in careful, deliberate letters and said, without looking up, That's the right answer, Dad. I didn't see Olivia for 6 weeks. The project moved through a phase that required her less. My partners handled the coordination. I heard from her twice by email, both times professionally and warmly, both times with nothing extra. I told myself this was fine. I meant it. Mostly, it was a Saturday morning in November when she came back. I was in my studio at home, working through sketches at the long table by the window, when I heard the front doorbell. Mia answered it before I could get up, and I heard voices in the hallway. One small and familiar, one I recognized from across a decade. Mia appeared in the studio doorway. She looked at me with the serene expression of someone who has been waiting for this for quite some time. "No, Olivia's here," she said. I stood up. Olivia came to the doorway of the studio and stopped there. She was wearing a gray coat and her hair was down, and she looked rested in a way she hadn't in months. Steadier, cleaner. Present. She looked like someone who had recently found her footing after a long time of being slightly off balance. "I'm not here because I'm lonely," she said. "I need you to know that." "I know," I said. "And I'm not here because I panicked, or because I'm second-guessing, or because it made more sense on some list." She took a breath. "I'm here because I know. I've been sitting with it for 2 months, and I know." I didn't say anything. She stepped further into the room. The morning light was good. It came from the east. Clean and unhurried, and it caught the edge of her coat in the particular way she was standing, which was the way she always stood when she'd decided something. I said once. She told me quietly that if you had told me sooner, I would have been yours. She looked at me steadily. "This time, I'm telling you first." I held still for a long moment. Then I crossed the room. I didn't say anything grand. There were no grand words left. We had used them up, the two of us. Over 10 years of letters not written and sentences not finished and moments not taken. What was left was simple. I took her hand. She let me. From somewhere behind us, in the kitchen, I heard Mia begin to hum the particular formless tune she hummed when she was contentedly occupied. The morning light moved slowly across the floor. The city outside was just beginning to wake up. Some things arrive late. That doesn't mean they arrive wrong. It just means the waiting was part of it, part of the cost, part of the learning, part of the long work of becoming the people who could finally, honestly, choose each other. We stood in the light of that Saturday morning, and for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't counting what I'd missed. I was holding what I had.